Callan, good to see you. Welcome to Popternative, man.
Thanks very much for having me.
It's really crazy. You look at it, we're talking about the Duel, and I'm a big fan of like genre bending, right? Like I don't think the genre like I don't like there's a lot of movies out there that stick to one genre. There's dramas, there's horrors. I feel like we could say that this movie is that has a lot of everything if you think about it. Was it like that reading the script for that specifically? Like there was a lot of elements there?
I mean, I think so. Yeah, one of my favorite genres has always been the dark comedy. I've always been a big John Michael and Martin McDonagh fan. Those guys make some of my favorite movies: The Guard, In Bruges. Obviously Banshees of Inisherin recently. And I know that Luke and Justin will tell you that In Bruges, especially, was something of an influence for this script. But I feel like every movie ought to walk the line between genres a little bit. You don't want to stick too close to any given template, otherwise you're just making what's been made before. But I think they were just as creative as they needed to be.
Absolutely. This kind of script to screen journey really interests me too, Callan. So it's like you're reading the script, you're getting ready, you're preparing a little bit, and then boom, you go film it. What was that like for you specifically on this film? And is it different depending on the project, or is it usually the same process for you?
This was quite a unique process. First of all, because it was one of the quickest turnarounds from script to screen that I've ever been a part of. I'm sure there's a record been set somewhere, but I wouldn't be surprised if this was in contention. I mean, they were writing it during COVID, and then 4 or 5 months later, we were filming a feature. And I know the industry was pretty starved for content at the time, so we may have the pandemic to thank for that. But it was really remarkable. I know I was one of the first people to read it. I know Dylan was as well. We were some of the early, I guess, tonal gauges for them because we were close members of the target demographic, I suppose. And so when I read it, I was pretty immediately obsessed with it. And that's no great surprise, obviously, because it's two dear friends of mine who wrote it, and we're friends because we have much in common.
Yeah.
So when I read it, I was like, well, I struggled to see a future where I'm not, at least a small part of this. Certainly, that would have been a grim thing to see it come out and to not be involved because I just loved it so much. And I know that they were just excited to work with friends as well. And so happily, cronyism came into play, and they put me in one of the leads. I did have to audition, and I'm sure the boys will kindly tell you that my audition was the best, but I doubt it. So yeah,
that's funny. That's awesome. And it's funny because you talked about the quickness, but I mean, there's so much that kind of goes into it before you go to camera on the Duel. Like there are a lot of discussions, some discussions you're involved with, but there's a lot of like production stuff and everything. So in a lot of ways, you could see it as two journeys, right? Before filming and after filming from a storyteller actor perspective. Or do you see it as one big journey with multiple steps from a storytelling acting perspective?
I think it is. I mean, it's definitely, I've internalized it as one big journey. Obviously, Luke and Justin and everyone involved behind the scenes, they may feel differently because it really, obviously, I read the script and I was talking to them back and forth about it, but it really began for me when I got to set. But there were so many people working so hard to bring it to bear in the first place. And so they may think differently. But I mean, it was just a beautiful thing to watch it grow from something so simple, from such a I don't know, concise, clean seed, that first script that I read, into this kind of world that they've built, this family that I'm now going to go and run into in Indiana, the premiere, and these great friends that I've made who I've been seeing regularly over the last few years while I've been waiting for this movie to come out. So it definitely feels like one big journey to me with different stages. Sure.
No, absolutely. It's interesting because, I feel like you mentioned kind of the dark comedy and Bruges and everything. And I feel like the answer to this question is you probably try not to do this, but sometimes it's kind of hard. But like, do you ever think about the audience watching something like The Duel, like while you're making it? Or does that kind of happen like more like after you wrap specifically?
I mean, I think it's inevitable because you're making it to be watched, right? It's the same thing when you're writing anything, you're writing it to be read. And I think we're social creatures, and it's very difficult to completely divorce oneself from the imagined opinions of other people. So you do have to factor that in. And of course, there's clever decisions that are made on every movie when it comes to trying to appeal to the widest audience without compromising the spirit of what you're creating.
Yeah.
Because you want people to enjoy it. You don't want to dig yourself a hole of your own kind of passion and have it be unwatchable. But it also, if you lean too heavily in that direction, you run the risk of kind of diluting the soul of the thing. So once we got onto set, the script was written rather, and while they were doing updates here and there, for the most part, we were into it. We just had to get from A to B, or from A to Z, really. Start the film, finish the film, and then in the editing room they could worry about what would play and how things would register. But yeah, you can't really afford to think too much about what people are going to say until you have, something that's actually finished.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I'm curious to see your answer to this question, because we did kind of talk about the fact that this is like a genre bending movie that has a lot of stuff in it, and you look at your incredible past body of work, and I'm just curious if like how separate are past journeys and past projects compared to kind of something like The Duel? Like, do you take things from Walking Dead, Flipped, I'm Number 4 to something like The Duel, or are they completely separate once you wrap? I'm curious about
that. They do sort of become compartmentalized in a way. Like, I have these little pockets of memory dedicated to these various projects, and then because they're such kind of social petri dishes, they're real kind of shotguns of experience. They are very particular to each other. So, Flipped in Michigan, we were shooting in Ann Arbor and thereabouts. That just the people, the accents, even so far as the flora of the area, they all form this mental map. And of course, I was a young kid at the time too, so there's nostalgia baked into there, as there is with every project. But because you so often are traveling with projects like films, you end up interacting with a whole new suite of people, and you're in a completely different place. And your brain gets, a lot of colors to paint that picture with. And in the end, they kind of they occupy their own little spaces in your head. And The Duel is no different. I mean, we were shooting in Indiana. The boys and I were staying in this COVID bubble house, and it was kind of autumn, so everything was gorgeous. And films take a while too. So as it's coming out, there's new music being released on a popular radio. There's new films coming out, and so you associate all these different experiences with it. And as far as what I've taken from those, it's impossible to say. When you spend a few months doing anything, it invades your character. And so I'm sure they've all contributed in their own ways. I mean, my accent is such a clusterfuck. They've all put a piece in there. But yeah, most of that's unconscious, I think.
Well, it's funny too, like with a world like The Walking Dead, and I talked to Chandler Riggs recently about a project about this too. I don't think any of you'll ever it will ever sink in how big that world actually is, right? From like a fandom universe perspective, right?
Sure.
Or did it finally sink in at some point how big it was?
I suppose it sank in eventually. I joined the show, I think it was season 7 or 8.
It's a bit different for you because it's already so established, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I really felt like I was joining kind of a family that had been living together in the same house for a long time. And I was the 5th wife's son coming in, and they didn't make me feel that way though. As soon as I got there, they welcomed me with open arms. But certainly going into it, there was some trepidation there. But yeah, I feel like the show was so well established that I was a small piece of a larger whole, and I didn't inherit the craziness of that world. But I will say that more than anything else, I get recognized for that now. If I'm walking around and someone's like, "Hey, are you that dude with the scraggly beard from The Walking Dead?"
You're like,
and so it's been lovely.
Do you ever go, no, but I get that. Have you ever done anything like that? Like, no,
yes,
but
I have.
That a lot. Okay.
Because happily I walk that line between super recognizable and not so sure. So people normally, when they look at me, they squint from across the room, and they're not, they're not 100%. And so I've sometimes said, no, but I know exactly who you're talking about. You're talking about Alden from The Walking Dead, and it's played by a guy named Callan McAuliffe. I get this all the time. Have a nice day.
Oh my God. I hope one day someone watches this interview and they're like, that was me. He did that to me.
Maybe no, but normally I'm just glad that someone's saying something nice because it's they're taking the time out of their day to say, hey, you had an impact on my life, however small, and we haven't met before, but let's
Dude,
meet now.
I am number
And that's
four is
pretty
like
thing.
I am number four is like I love that movie so much, man. Like that movie's so good. I love that movie. And like I know it was a while ago for you, but like it's so good.
Sure.
It's so
No, but I
good.
love it when people bring up the more the older, the lesser known projects. I am number four. I sometimes will get someone coming up to me for that, and that's a wonderful thing because I have such cherished memories from that shoot as well. And then recently, I was just in Dublin. I was shooting something in Ireland for sort of about 6 weeks. Got back a few days ago, and I was in this bar. I forget the name of the bar. I wish I knew it, but the guy behind the bar, he goes, "Hey, I feel like I've seen you in something." And I said, you might have, it's usually The Walking Dead. Have you seen that one? Great show. And he was like, no. It's a film called Hacker, which was this film that I did quite a few years ago now. And we shot it between Toronto and Thailand. And it was directed by an extraordinary Kazakh director named Akan Satayev. And not enough people saw this movie. It was such a blast to shoot, but it's the first time ever in the wild that someone has said, I saw this fucking movie that you were in called Hacker, and it blew my mind. It made it all the way. It made it to Dublin, to this obscure bar in Dublin. So that's sometimes those are
It's
more
so
precious.
funny because I know Flipped because one day, this is a while ago, my mom was just watching it. And I was like, what movie is this? And she's like, it's called Flipped. And like it was one of those, and like I sat next to her and I just watched the whole thing.
It's just Flipped is such a rare film, man. I get prouder and prouder of it every year that goes by. Just especially watching the landscape of cinema change and seeing what people make.
Yeah, but it's the coming of age slice of life, right? Like that's huge, right?
Yeah, of course. And it's just such an uncomplicated, unpretentious, beautifully shot movie.
Yeah.
And it's full of extremely talented people. It's directed by an extremely talented man. And that was just one of the deeper honors of my life, obviously.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I can't wait for people to check out The Duel because it's awesome. And I just love the whole kind of vibe, man. Like it's so much fun. And like, you just kind of like dive in. And like I said, man, it's the genre bending, like the dark comedy. Dark comedy is genre bending. I will say that. Like I know it's been around for a while, but it is. It's genre bending, and people will be able to check that out. Callan, so great chatting with you, man. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Thanks for giving me the time.
Yeah, of course. Your Instagram account is where people keep up to date with everything. It's just your name, right?
Yeah, that's the only one I really kind of use regularly. My Twitter, I've forgotten the password to, and I've never been able to wrap my head around TikTok. So find me on Instagram.
So it's just your full name, right?
No, it's well, I guess you can type that in; it'll come up. But my handle is at McBombadil,
Okay.
MC Bombadil, which is the Lord of the Rings character.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. But that's the thing.
Awesome. This has been Pop Turner, youtube.com/Pop Turner for previous episodes. So next time, it's Callan and PD Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.